This is Jennifer Valentine-Miller at Healing Relations PR, and welcome to my Media Hub. The radio station with a message and with music and talk media that is good for the soul. With all the devastation taking place in Israel, a lot are asking, will there be a time for celebration and remembrance? During Hanukkah, Jewish people will light a menorah, which is a 9-branch candelabra. The menorah holds 9 flames, one of which is a shamash, a tendant, which is used to kindle the other 8 lights. On the first night, just 1 flame is lit. On the second night, an additional flame is lit, and so on. By the 8th night of Hanukkah, all 8 lights are alight. A light for hope. The current issue and financial situation leaves many in society thinking, is it just them going through this repetitive turmoil of being in financial destitute? But have you spared a thought for the businesses who also have to look after us as well as their own finances? Finance is often perceived as a business discipline most far removed from spirituality and religion. Based on press coverage of the recent financial crisis and regularly occurring scams and scandals, when many people think of the finance that they are likely to think of is ruthless and ethically dubious financiers ready to take advantage of the uninformed. Most business students associate finance with impersonal numbers, complex formulae, and decision rules devoid of ethical or value judgments. However, this review of the interaction of finance and religion shows that not only has there been a long historical relationship between the two, but religion continues to influence financial decision-making in the modern world. Historically, religious-inspired regulation limited financial activities in the modern world. Religious preferences have prompted new banking and mutual fund investment products and continue to affect how corporate leaders make specific investment and financial decisions. From a business perspective, this suggests that business leaders and investors should be aware of how their own religiosity-inspired biases and preferences and those of the people they employ or to seek to do business with may impact their financial decisions. Such an understanding will improve business leaders over financial decisions, help them to better manage their own employees, and more effectively market financial products to their customers, just as the celebration of religious holidays present unique commercial opportunities. And this is an awareness of the preferences of potential customers, allowing business leaders to develop specific financial products targeted to religious customers to the benefit of both the bottom line and their new customers. The Bible contains several references prohibiting the practice of usury, a term commonly used to describe the lending money for interest. Biblical examples of prohibiting usury include generally in Ezekiel 18:13. It says, if he has exacted usury, he shall not live. And one that is specifically directed to the poor can be found in Leviticus 25:36 and 37. And to members of one's own community, there is Deuteronomy 23:20-21. More interesting to the general practitioner than debates over proper interpretation of these restrictions is Lewison's inquiry, which has a description of how the limitations on on lending for interest were historically based on biblical grounds. From the Council of Nicaea in 325 CE, the then Papal Catholic Church implemented various restrictions on charging interest until it was universally prohibited throughout the Christendom in 1139, and the Church was accepted lending money at moderate rates of interest in the 19th century, perhaps partly reflecting the increasingly sophisticated post-Renaissance market economy. The non-Catholic nations and secular powers in Europe were more open to the practice of charging interest on loans. These protestations instead relegated the level of interest that could be charged, effectively redefining usury as charging excessive levels of interest. In Holland, their interest is up to 12% on commercial loans, and it was in 1540 in England under Henry VIII, which allowed interest to go up 10% on all loans to 1545, though it was quickly reversed and not revived until 1571 under Queen Elizabeth I. So nowadays, it is inconceivable that financial regulations in liberal democratic states might be based on religious scripture. The US Consumer Guide proposed that the rules to limit modern-day versions of usury, for example payday and auto title loans, describes a high annual percentage interest rates of up to 390%, but justifies that the proposed rules as a means of preventing debt traps for the financial vulnerable. Consumers now are raising many religious concerns and asking why it is allowed. The current US tax code actually encourages both businesses and individuals to take on interest-bearing debt by making some interest payments tax deductible. The decline of biblical authority in regulating finance in the modern economy is not surprising. The opportunity for today's business leaders is to recognize that the greater freedom offered by secular laws also brings the opportunity to offer specialized products to customers who still want financial products consistent with their faith. For example, from 1963 to 1976, there was a demand from devout Muslims, which resulted in the emergence of modern banks operating in accordance to Islamic principles. Islamic banking is now a huge market with an estimated 2 trillion of assets managed by Islamic banks. The Quran also forbids interest and usury. Depositors at Islamic banks therefore do not earn interest, but instead receive a share of the return from the bank's investment of their deposit. So a home mortgage is also structured differently. In cases like this, the bank generally buys a house, and the consumer then buys a house from the bank in installments, which total more than the bank's original purchase price. The economic outcomes for such banks in the Middle East and its customers may differ little from those of traditional interest-bearing products. Further differentiating feature with religious motivation involves investing in industries which the religion might find as sinful, such as eating pork products, drinking alcohol, and gambling. There are many sort of attitudes that take place within Christian households. Theorists can use data from the DNB household survey of about 2,000 households in Europe over a period of 1995 to 2008 to investigate whether religiosity impacts households' finance, they find that there are indeed differences in the economic attitudes and financial decisions of religious and non-religious households, and that there are further differences between, let's say, the Catholic household and the evangelical household. In particular, religious households are found to be more likely to save than non-religious households, and Christian households are less likely to invest in stocks than it would do in a non-Christian household. There are authors who make no claims as to the causality of this, because it's impossible that the sort of people to be prone to thrift and saving are more likely to be religious, or that financial and religious attitudes are both learned from parents. The authors also acknowledge that the associations they observe in Europe may not be applicable to other countries, even if it cannot be claimed that religiosity directly impacts household financial decisions. The association between the two is both significant and commercially useful. Banks may become more profitable either by offering specific savings and investment products which reflect the different attitudes to risk and saving different types of households, or by adjusting their marketing and communication efforts for their existing products to help overcome different types of household aversions or risk to their savings. People do not just make decisions about their own household finances. Corporate leaders also make financial investment decisions on behalf of their shareholders, and it is already acknowledged that CEOs have a direct impact on their firm's decisions and profitability. A paper tests whether a CEO's religious affiliation affects a firm's corporate decisions. In particular, they look at capital structure, diversification, and investments. The CEOs in the sample of overwhelming as a Christian, 73%. The paper looks exclusively at the differences in the decisions of firms managed by Christian CEOs, which is 41%, and non-Christian CEOs, which is 30%. And the study suggests that relative to firms led by Christian CEOs and firms led by the stagnant ruling of Catholicism, exhibit more conservative policies. They have less debt, diversify more, and invest less in capital. And the study also finds that firms' profitability is lower as a result. And this is just according to recent research. And the study controls for many factors and performs clever econometric tests to show that these specific decisions are likely the result of a CEO's religious beliefs. I know as Christians that we are really concerned about the lending aspect and relying on credit cards. But if we have a mentality that debt needs to be paid back, then we are in right standing as Christians on those grounds. So to demonstrate the causality that the authors use and to make this statement, there was a certain council, religious council in 1962-65, which is convened in order to consider how, for example, the most richest church, which is the Catholic Church in Vatican, should respond to the modern world. It prompted debate about doctrine and practices throughout the church, and this very rare event had a profound impact on their followers' views and understanding of the religion, how this had no impact on non-Catholics. So SRI, which is socially responsible investment, sometimes is negatively seen as sinful. Investment where activities, even they may also be positively screened and green, and could be a socially positive investment activity, it still believes that the profits gained by this are unethical. And the authors of Feroz, Monoz, and Vargas studies that they and confirmed that managers of religious mutual funds do not perform as well as managers who do not limit the investment based on religious consideration. In other words, investors in religious mutual funds accept lower returns as a price of not investing in sinful industries, which is the bottom line. And smart business leaders will recognize the universal applicability of this result. Religious consumers will pay a premium for products which are consistent with their values. It has been greatly considered how a leader's religiosity can impact the decisions taken on behalf of the firm's shareholders. The firm's reporting and accounting policies are intended to do better by informing shareholders about how well a CEO is managing their firm, and that is known as accountability. And these policies are implemented by people, and it's not unreasonable to consider whether religion might impact a firm's financial reporting. It's difficult to find publicly available information on the religiosity of managers and their employers. We do have small businesses who feel that maybe the gospel could be not only a barrier but a limitation. And such businesses are asked to more reach out to the community so that the community can provide business themselves. So there are such firms that use different proxy for potential earning managements, and they are associated with high levels of real earning managements. And there are some Christian religious groups that as we've just spoken about, who are at the top end of that. But taxes, again, need to be paid. Interestingly, they conclude that religious social norms present a mechanism for reducing costly agency conflicts, particularly when other external monetary is low. In other words, they suggest that when there is concern that managers might not always make decisions in the best interest of their customers, we call them shareholders, religious social norms may act as an alternative to costly and intrusive oversight. So the religious identification of individuals has an observable impact on household financial decisions and corporate investment decisions. This can have a direct impact on financial returns and risk. It has been shown that the religious denomination with a CEO might not carry as much high risk. However, similarly, religious individuals voluntarily choose to invest in ethical mutual funds even though they yield lower returns. Lastly, it has been shown that religion can impact the accuracy of financial reports and potentially act as an effective means of keeping a firm's CEO simply honest. So what does it mean for business leaders and investors, especially if they are Christians. Firstly, they should be aware of their own religiously inspired biases and preferences, and those of their business partners, employees, and customers. Acknowledging such biases allows managers to consider whether they need to revise their decision or compensate for them, just as executive compensation is already used to alter managers' attitudes to risk and investment horizons. For example, to overcome managers' risk aversion or to encourage long-term investment. Managers and investors can appropriate and generate effective mechanisms to compensate for unwanted biases or promoted desired biases. Secondly, business practitioners must accept that their faith may impact the riskiness and the profitability of their investments. And lastly, more positively, recognizing that there are many customers and potential customers with shared beliefs who should help managers to design profitable new products for these specific customers group. And it already exists because there is kosher food and halal food products. They may exist financially and banking products which can appeal to distinct faith-based customer groups. Alternatively, business leaders may consciously design more effective ways to market existing financial products based on the specific attitudes to risk and saving of customer groups.
Thank you for listening to the Jennifer Valentine-Miller Show on PRZ FM 109.2. Until next time, wishing you a blessed week ahead.